Oh, welcome back. This is Two Beards and a Bible. I'm John Swino.
I'm Dave Tenney.
And we're looking into the scriptures a little bit more today. We are beginning at Mathew chapter 13, starting at verse 44. And we'll let Dave read for a little while there, and then we'll talk about some
You
things.
gave me a good one. It's only one verse. This is the parable of the hidden treasure. And Jesus continued talking about the kingdom of heaven. He says that the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid, and for joy over it he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field.
Okay.
You know, that reminds me of a story with my grandpa. He was remodeling this house, and this was back in the 1960s. And he opens up the wall. He's tearing the drywall out. I think he was putting a kitchen in it, and he found a fruit jar full of money. Right?
Nice.
Now my grandpa was an honest man, and he did give it to the guy who owned the house.
He found them?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But if you knew some house had $1 million in it, and it was $100,000 or $200,000, you'd do everything you could
To buy that house.
to buy that house.
Why is that one going so high at auction?
Yeah, exactly.
It reminds me of a unrelated story, unrelated to the Bible, but related to what you're talking about. My grandfather grew up in a small town in West Virginia, and in fact,
Mine too.
when he came, I think rather close to each other, actually. But when my grandfather wanted to come to Ohio to get a job, to come up and work for the B&W up here, he didn't have the money. It was during, right after the Depression, and he didn't have the money to come up here, so he went to the guy in town that he was like the town bank. It was an old guy that was known to have money, and he would lend money to people. And so my grandpa went and told him he needed some money, and this guy said, okay, I'll be back in an hour. And he went walking off into the woods. The guy had his money stashed in jars buried in the woods somewhere. And to this day, I'm positive that there is money buried in jars out in the woods of that town, and I'd love to go search for it.
I am sure. My other grandpa always told the story. He said, we come up to Ohio. He goes, and we went to an Italian restaurant. He says, and they brought out a plate of worms, and we walked out of that place.
Right?
He wasn't eating spaghetti. And I guess he never liked spaghetti his whole life.
Interesting.
My dad said when he came home from school, and if he smelled liver and onions, he knew they were having spaghetti. Because my grandma would always make him liver and onions a little bit, and then the rest of them would have spaghetti.
Yeah, liver and onions, that's my kryptonite.
Oh, yeah, that's good stuff. So,
Well, yeah, when we look at this, the kingdom of heaven being like a treasure hidden in a field, you think of a field, it's pretty wide open, and it just takes a little bit of investigation to find out what's in that field. I mean, maybe you have to go through some tall grass or something, but the kingdom of heaven, it's right there in front of your nose.
it's worth giving everything you got to get it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it talks about. I think the idea is the value of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't you read verse 45 and 46? That talks about it, the same thing again.
All right. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it.
Yeah. So, when you find that one thing you're looking for, you'll do everything to get it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's what that man did.
And we all do that. If you're price conscious and you shop around for prices of anything you're looking for, when you find the one, you know that, okay, this is the one that is going to do
It
what
was
I
like
need it
my
to do.
wife when I found.
There you go.
There you go. I hope she's listening to this. How about the parable of the dragnet? I'll read that. It says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that was cast into the sea and gathered some of every kind. You ever seen a dragnet? Mm-hmm. I think they have weights on them.
Yeah.
To pull them down to the bottom. He says, which when it was full and drew the shore, and they sat down and gathered the good in the vessels, but threw the bad away. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come forth, separate the wicked from among the just, and cast them in the furnace of fire, and there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Jesus said to them, have you understood all these things? And they said to him, yes. Then he said to them, therefore, every scribe instructed concerning the kingdom of heaven is like a householder who brings out his treasure, things new and things old. Okay, so that one part's a little bit, it's one of them more hard verses to understand. So he basically, he kind of brings it all together about this idea of the kingdom of heaven being valuable. And then he talks about, that again, I think it's this idea of a judgment. That the net goes out and it's gonna pull in all this different stuff. Some of it's good and some of it's bad.
Right. Yeah, because make no mistake, if you find yourself attending a congregation or an assembly of the Lord's church, you're in that dragnet. It doesn't mean that you're going to go the same place as everybody else. You've got to be one that fits the description of what God desires.
Yeah.
There's, when you see, in reading that, it reminds me of those television shows that show like the crab fishermen or so on, and they have those big baskets that they bring up full of those crabs and lobsters and so on, and they have to measure the claw.
Yeah.
And they have to compare to see if it's one that is a keeper or not, and then other ones they throw overboard. So, in much the same way, we're told the angels are going to be the ones that do that harvest, and they're going to compare us with the ruler,
the measurement,
and if we fit that one, then wonderful.
Yeah. This last verse here, this is the one he says. He says, therefore, every scribe instructed concerning the kingdom of heaven. So you're talking about a scribe who would be a Christian, right? He said, is like a householder who brings out of his treasure things new and things old. And I think the idea is that if you have a scribe who's converted, he not only understands the old law and the application of it, but he would understand the new law too.
Yeah, and bringing the two together, connecting the two.
Connecting the old law with the new.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not under the old law, but we have it here to learn from it.
Yeah. We look back at that and we can gather a lot of good lessons from the old law, and it gives us a picture of the mind of God.
It does.
As a whole.
Yeah. People think, the God of the Old Testament was really mean. Well, he's the same God in the New Testament.
Yeah, and mean. What is mean? That's. You may be mean to your children in a moment, but maybe it's because
I needed that.
Exactly, the chastening, that is needed. And we live in a society now where everything has to be puppy dogs and smiles.
Yeah, maybe I should have used the term severe.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way God was severe then, and he's severe today too. He expects us to follow his rules.
We are again fortunate to be under this new covenant and in this dispensation of time where God is long-suffering. He sent his Son, he sent his word that we might be obedient to it.
Luckily, we have Jesus as an advocate, because if we didn't, we wouldn't have any hope.
Right.
We'd be in trouble.
We look around the world today and see the things that are happening, and they were happening in the old times as well. But God has never been able to have any part in those things.
No. So where are we at here, John? I think that finishes that section.
Yeah, I think we go over to Mark 8.
Mark chapter 8. So, as again, just a reminder, we're going through the Gospels chronologically. So that's why we're kind of skipping around books, but we're chronologically going through it. So Mark 8 is the next thing that happens.
Right, Mark 8, starting at chapter 18 and reading through verse 37.
Verse 18, rather. Right?
Yeah, Mark 8, chapter... exactly.
You'll get it right.
Mark chapter 8, verse 18. I'll start reading.
Okay.
You tell me when to stop. Mark 8, verse 18. Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many baskets full of fragments did you take up? They said to him, 12. Also, when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up? And they said, 7. So he said to them, "How is it you do not understand?" Then he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything.
We're reading the wrong thing, John.
Are we?
Yeah, we're supposed to be reading Mark chapter 4. I was looking at that and I'm like, that just doesn't make sense from where we were at.
Look what I did.
Well, there you go.
Matthew 8.
See, I followed right with you. Mark chapter, see, this is a rare mistake that John and I would make. You can write that on in your notebook. Mark chapter 4, verse 35 through 41.
All right.
Try her again. Take 2.
All right. On the same day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us cross over to the other side." Now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was, and other little boats were also with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that it was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a pillow, and they awoke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Then he arose and rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" And they feared exceedingly, and said to one another, "Who can this be, that even the wind and the sea obey him?"
Reminds me of that song, "Master, the Tempest is Raging."
Yes.
That's a wonderful gospel song, but talks about this kind of, and the chorus says, "Peace, be still."
Yeah.
And taken right out of here. So Jesus leaves all these people, and he gets in a boat, and he's like, "Okay, let's go over to the other side of this place."
Mm-hmm. And he was he not trying to just get away from the crowd?
Oh, yeah.
At that time?
Yeah. He left the multitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was as though as Jesus was going through, he couldn't, and later on as we read, we're going to read that he took the disciples away because they didn't even have time to eat.
Yeah.
The people were swarming him so much.
So he's in this boat and a big storm kicks up. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, Jesus must have been tired. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we forget that Jesus was still a man.
Right.
He was a man and God, but, he would suffer the same problems, of being tired, all of the things that we deal with today, tired, hungry, no sleep. And he gets in this boat and there's a storm kicking up and he's sound asleep.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, one of the things that I see in that is, you have Christ who, he is the Son of God. He knows and has that peace in the Father. He's able to sleep through all those things. His disciples, however, are all in a tizzy because there's a storm. And when we go through the storms of life, we want to be those that are able to sleep like Christ. We want to have that peace and be able to be still and be able to sleep well.
I'll tell you what, I've been in a boat on a rough sea.
Yeah.
And it is not a pleasant thing.
Right. And I don't imagine that this was a huge boat.
No.
That they were in.
Which makes it even worse.
Right.
Right. So one of them wakes him up and says, "Teacher, do you care not that we are perishing?" What kind of question is that?
Right. Right.
No, he cares.
Right. And in reality, too, where is the hope of every Christian?
It's in Christ.
So if we perish in this life,
that's where our hope still is in.
Right. Our hope is beyond this life. It's not here.
Yeah.
So to live as Christ, to die as gain.
Yep. So he says, so Jesus just says, "Be still, peace, be still," and it just shuts right down. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, that would scare me.
Right? Yeah, and well, the disciples didn't have any they believed.
Yeah, I think it says, it's funny. It says, he says, "Why are you so fearful?" And then the next verse says, "And they feared exceedingly." If they thought they were afraid of the wind,
right,
you ought to be more afraid of the one that can calm the wind.
Right,
it's more powerful than the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, "Who can this be that even the wind and sea obey him?"
Right. that would be enough to get your attention.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that would definitely wake you up. So.
Yep.
Okay, so where are we going here now?
Well,
how about we'll stay in Mark chapter 5 and go to. We'll read through.
Well, hey, let me go back here for a second.
You got.
'Cause I think we're missing something here.
We
in
may
Matthew,
be okay.
where we were. See, the 8:18 through 27. That came out of. I transposed these two.
Yeah, Matthew chapter 8.
If we go back to Matthew chapter 8, and read it starting at verse 18.
Let's look through here. Oh, so it
Yeah.
actually starts at verse 23. Oh, that part of it.
Yeah. So I'm going to read the part leading up to that. So
Okay.
let's go to start at verse 18. Matthew 8 at verse 18. And when Jesus saw the great multitudes about him, he gave a command to depart to the other side. Then a certain scribe came and said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man, has nowhere to lay his head." Then another of his disciples said to him, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." But Jesus said to him, "Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead." And then we get into the boat.
I think there's there's I think two major thoughts here. One, that Jesus didn't even have a place he had nothing.
Right.
And
again, it goes back to that counting the cost.
Yeah, and I think this goes to the idea, if you're expecting something physical in this life out of being a Christian, you miss the point.
Right.
That's not what this is about, and Jesus never taught that.
And I remember a person that was baptized years ago, and I remember that there was a lot of trouble in their life, and they were in a desperate time, and they had heard and listened and obeyed the gospel, but they had a misunderstanding, because afterwards, maybe a couple months later, they were very upset that life hadn't gotten easier, that they still had bills, that they still had all this trouble and turmoil and family troubles in their lives. Yeah. And that's never promised to us here in this life. The troubles, the lack of troubles, the lack of care is going to come
afterwards.
Yeah. This life, man is a few days and full of trouble. And
yeah.
That's
man's days are few and full of trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So this idea that if you're looking for physical blessings, that's not necessarily what Christianity is about.
Right.
Then there's this fellow who wants to be his disciple, and he says, "Well, I will, but I got this thing I got to take care of."
Right.
And my thought is that, if you're going to be a Christian, you can't let things of the world get in the way of your service to God.
Right.
And I think that's the point. Yeah. Jesus is. I've heard it said, let the spiritually dead bury their own dead. Right. I'm not sure if that's the best way to explain this. I think both of these things talk about, your motivation for serving God. Mm-hmm. That it should be the first thing, it should be the first thing in your life.
You think about, when someone passes away from this life, the world, what do? We have a funeral, we have some time of mourning, and a lot of effort is put into the burial. I mean, look at what the Egyptians did.
Oh gosh,
burying kings. Look at how much money a casket costs.
Even today, yeah.
Today, and you just look at all of that we put in there, and that kind of lends itself to that statement. Let the dead bury their own dead, because as we have that hope of heaven after a while, the physical things they don't mean anything, and we understand that that body that is left over on this earth, that's not where that person is anymore, and it does it does speak to the mindset of a Christian, and how they shouldn't have their hope on something physical. And truly how wonderful it is for we've recently known of a few faithful Christians that have passed away, and honestly, there's no place to shed a tear there, really. Of course, family is going to miss them and so on, but understanding that they've gone on to their reward, that they're comforted, they're in a place of comfort now, it really doesn't leave us any room to get dragged down and be sorrowful and worry about dragging it out. We don't.
In fact, this Friday I've got to go to a funeral of a lady who just passed away, who was 95 years old, and she became a Christian when she was like 83.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's never too late.
No, it's not.
And she was faithful, for the rest of her life. So
yeah, that's a wonderful thing, and something that just comes to mind. As we go through our lives, a lot of times we put things off, and that person that you're speaking of, they had that opportunity and they were able to fulfill the promises of the desires of God for mankind, and they were able to be obedient to the gospel before they took their last breath. But I've also seen it many times where someone puts it off, and perhaps at the end of life, when things start to come into focus, when they realize that they're not long for this earth, they start to think and look inwardly, and they start to maybe pay a little bit more attention to the Word of God. And yet they find themselves in a situation where this COVID thing has put people in a situation where, say you're stricken with that and you're sequestered in some ICU unit.
Yeah.
How are you gonna obey the gospel then? Even if you're sitting there in that terror of that moment and the troubles that come with that physical malady, and you're thinking, I need to be obedient to the gospel. How are you going to do that?
Right. It definitely makes it difficult.
Yeah.
The time is now.
Exactly.
Let's read the last few verses here and we'll wrap it up for today.
Okay.
Talks about the demon-possessed men healed, the two demons. It says, when he had come to the other side, to the country of the Gergesenes, I'm guessing, there met him two demon-possessed men coming out of the tombs, exceedingly fierce, so that no one could pass that way. And suddenly they cried out, saying, what have we to do with you, Jesus, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time? Now a good way off from them was a herd of many swine feeding. So the demons begged him, saying, if you cast us out, permit us to go into the herd of swine. He said to them, go. So when they had come out, they went into the herd of swine. And suddenly the whole herd of swine ran violently down a steep place into the sea and perished in the water. And then those who kept them fled, and they went away into the city and told everything, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they begged him to depart from their region. You'd figure they'd been happy, but not. There's a couple of interesting things in here. One thing is that these demons believed in Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, they knew who he was.
It takes more than belief.
Right, it does. Yeah, even the demons believe and tremble.
Yeah, and this is a good example of that. Now these things don't really, I don't believe people are demon possessed today.
No.
But back then this was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was a real thing.
Right.
So these two fellows, they're out of their minds, and Jesus comes and they recognize Jesus right away.
Yes. Yeah, and the people in the town, they're afraid when they see this, and I guess rightfully so. I mean, that would get your attention. Just like many of the other things that Jesus had done, it would get the attention of the people. But instead of that fear turning into a godly fear, one that would, as we're told, that we're supposed to have a godly fear and act with godly fear, that we might do what the will of the Father is. Instead of doing that, they sent him away.
Yeah.
This is getting a little bit too real. What's going on here? We don't understand this. Get out of here.
I've often wondered if maybe they were just upset because they lost all them pigs.
well, maybe. Maybe so.
But at any rate, that they came out and they obviously believed what happened, but they didn't want anything to do with this.
Right.
So
and the demons, when they ask Christ, don't send us into the abyss. They know that he has the power to do anything.
He said it's before the time. So they even know that there is some time.
Yeah.
There's a time limit. So, well, John, I guess we'll stop right there.
Okay.
We finished up Matthew chapter 8. Next week here, I believe we're going to start in Matthew chapter 9.
That sounds about right.
I can't wait.
All right. Well, thanks for joining in with us again. We hope you found it helpful. We, as we look through the scriptures and we study together, we're learning as we go through here too. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do that. It's often said that the teacher is the one that learns the most out of a lesson. And as we record ourselves going through this lesson, we're learning as we go through. I've learned some things as we've gone through these lessons that we've been doing.
This podcast is kind of like a kitchen table conversation that somebody else is listening to.
Yeah, and we invite you to join in with us. So hopefully you continue to join in with us, and Lord willing, we'll see you, or you'll see us next week. And so with that being said, thanks for joining in. This is Two Beards and a Bible signing out.